If I had to pick a favorite so far, it would be, surprise, surprise, the burgundy and white leaf pattern with the rubber outsole onto them. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're moving into an apparel craft. I'm going to be making this sewing pattern from Twig and Tale. It's their Wayfarer shoe. It's a type of slip-on shoe that you can customize to make out of any fabric you want. And I've made this shoe before. These here, they're kind of old and beat up. I made them as a pair of house shoes and I've been using them for about a year now, and honestly, I love them. I love the fit, I love the style of them, the customization options. And with these being at the end of their life, I decided that it's time to make a new pair of house shoes. But not only are we going to be making a new pair of house shoes, we're also going to try our hand at attaching soles to make an outdoor pair as well. So let me show you guys what we're working with today. Okay, so this is a PDF pattern that Twig and Tale sell on their website. It's also on their Etsy shop, which I'll provide the link in the description below if you guys find any interest or want to follow along for yourselves. But since I already made these, I have my pattern already printed out. It's a PDF. You just print it out in your home printer, or you can print it out at a local shop. But with these being shoes, it's not as cumbersome or difficult as printing out like clothing PDF sewing patterns. So that's the pattern we're going to be using. For the indoor shoes, I'm going to be using this canvas fabric that I have left over from a home decor project. Another good thing with these shoe patterns is it's a great scrap buster. If you have any kind of leftover fabric that you just want to use up, it's a great way to use these for kids' shoes or adult shoes. But for the house shoes, we're going to be using this canvas in this nice green pattern. Kind of a nice positive slogan, enjoy today. And for the bottom, I'm going to be using this non-slip fabric. It has like rubber bumps along the bottom. It's kind of what you'd find at the bottom of normal house shoes or pajamas, where it'll help you not slip if you have wood or tile in your home. And then the next pair of shoes that we'll be making is using this canvas, which is a burgundy leaf pattern. I got it from a coworker who was giving away extra fabric at her house. With this one, because it's already such a vibrant, fun design, I'm gonna try my hand at doing some gold embroidery just to enhance it and add a little pizzazz. And we'll be using this solid burgundy fabric as the lining, as well as these white rubber soles that I got off of Amazon. I've never attached a sole before, so we're gonna try this. I've watched a few tutorials for different types of shoes that people make. For the most part, you make the shoe, trim it down to size, and then you'll use contact cement or shoe cement to glue it to the bottom. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The last shoe that we're gonna be making is using this white faux leather that I've just had sitting around with nothing to do with. I figured this would be a nice white pair since my white pair of shoes that I usually wear are kind of beat up. So this would be a fun one to do in this style of shoe. We're gonna be lining it with this fun floral fabric. And for the sole, kind of similar to traditional moccasins, I'm gonna be using natural suede. Suede and leather bottom shoes, specifically moccasin styles, are great for dry weather if you're gonna be wearing them outdoors. Not great for wet, obviously, because it'll seep through. But we're gonna try our hand at making it with these as well. So let's get cutting. Okay guys, and here we have the PDF pattern that I printed out previously from Twig and Tale. It's really great because they make this shoe very versatile. They have a pattern for narrow feet, regular width feet, and wide width feet. Since I wear traditionally barefoot shoes most of the time, I like to make mine in the widest width possible. And as you can see, the pieces are really small, which is why I feel like it's easily printable at home in your home printer versus printing at a shop. With some, apparel, clothing, dresses, pants, they're such big patterns that it is really useful to be able to print it out at a larger print shop. And here I'm just smoothing out our fabric, getting my pattern weights to help keep the paper in place as I cut. And then we're just going to cut as close as possible to the edge of the pattern piece here. I readjust the pattern weights as I go, just because they kind of keep moving and some edges are a little more likely to rise up than others. And then lastly, with the pattern for this piece, we're just gonna mark the seams. I really love this fabric. I actually learned that this fabric is from IKEA. I'm not that old, but I definitely don't remember a time where IKEA sold fabric, because they have such interesting prints for their home decor and a lot of their decor pieces that I could imagine that they have great fabric, kind of like this one. It's a very interesting but simple print. If anyone knows anything about IKEA selling fabric, please let me know in the comments. All right, and then here we're just cutting out the top toe part of the shoe. For all of these, I'm cutting it with the fabric folded, since we're gonna need 2 pieces. And then here, same with the non-slip texture fabric, just moving my pattern weights around to make sure that everything stays as aligned as possible as I cut. I would hate to find out that I completed it and I cut off too much along one edge, because with this, I only have this one piece. Another thing to note is this PDF pattern is really simple. There are only 3 pattern pieces that you need once you choose a size, and that's going to be the sole, which you see here, the upper part, which I believe is called like a vamp or something that goes over the top of your foot, and then the heel piece. And then cutting it in fabric, you're only going to need 2 of the exterior fabric and then 2 pieces of the lining or interior fabric. So again, it really uses such little fabric that it honestly can be used with a scrap buster. Like, I know that these are big pieces of fabric that I have left over, but with the size of the project pieces, it could easily have been made using smaller, maybe like fat quarters or leftover pieces. I'd imagine you could even do, if you quilt, a patchwork type of pattern of some kind. That'd be pretty interesting. I don't quilt, so I don't have that kind of stuff handy, but that would be a really interesting shoe to have if you want, more fun shoes versus just traditional solid colors. And I'm doing all the cutting at once. So once I'm done with one fabric, I immediately just start cutting the next. And we'll just repeat this process for each fabric that we have. Welcome back, everyone. It is a new day and we're ready to knock out all 3 of these shoes and get them done today. I've already finished cutting everything out, prepping the fabric by adding the fusible interfacing on the back to make it stiffer for the top of the shoe. And I also went ahead and got out some 1/4 elastic, which is going to be used to secure the back part of the shoe. So let's get started sewing. The instructions for this sewing pattern call for us to start with the heel piece of the shoe. So I've just gone ahead and laid out each of our heels for the 3 shoe pairs that we're making, right sides together. Right sides meaning the parts that you want to be seen on the inside and outside of the shoe. And then moving through, we're going to sew a 3/8 seam along the top edge of the shoe, trying to keep it as evenly as possible. And of course, repeating the process with each of the other heel pieces that we have. Once all of our heel pieces are sewn at that top seam, we're then going to press them really well with the iron. We want to get them as flat as possible as we flip them over so that the inside and outside are now facing the appropriate directions, and that seam is enclosed on the inside. Of course, you can trim that seam before you turn it, but I did not think about that at the time. Working through 3 pairs of shoes, my mind was kind of all over the place. And of course, repeat that process with each of the other heel pieces. Once we have that top stitch in, we're then going to sew a channel about 3/8 from the top of the heel piece once it's turned inside out. That channel is going to be for our elastic. So whatever size elastic you're using, if maybe you don't have 1/4, you'll just adjust that seam or that size of the seam to whatever elastic you have. And once that channel is sewn, we're then going to use the paper clip trick, which is where you attach a paper clip to the end of the elastic and then move it inch by inch through the channel that it's supposed to be in. Once that end piece of the elastic is at the end of the fabric on the entrance end, we're then going to sew a quick top stitch to lock it in place so that it doesn't move around or pop out while we finish the shoe. And then we're going to finish pushing that paper clip through to the other side of the heel piece. Pull it out, making sure there's enough elastic and room for the sewing machine to then do another top stitch at that end, tying everything in place. And then we're going to trim, making sure that everything is the way it is intended, making sure that it's good. And then we're going to repeat on each of the other heel pieces for all the shoes. Off camera, I went ahead and applied our mid-weight fusible to the uppers of the canvas pair, the green pair and the burgundy pair. And it's iron-on, so it was really quick and easy. I just had to apply even pressure and heat along the shoe to make sure that it adheres, or that the glue adheres to the canvas fabric. And so now we're just going to go ahead and add our gold embroidery to the project. I was really excited about this thread because it looks so nice, but I didn't really have a plan with this. I kind of just figured maybe I'd follow along the lines of the pattern, since it is a very line-heavy pattern, and hope for the best. If I was more skilled in hand embroidery, I probably would have actually sat down with a hoop and did some traditional embroidery onto some of the leaves, which it would have paid off, because all in all, the gold embroidery ended out coming really subtle on the toe part of the shoes. So we just moved forward with the project. Here we're going to go ahead and clip the heel piece to the toe piece of our shoe, right sides together, making sure that we align along the edges. And from there, we're going to sew a 3/8 seam joining the toe and the heel part of the shoe. And of course, we're going to repeat that with each of our shoes. And now with the toe and the heel part of our sewing patterns joined, we're now going to take the toe lining portion and align that with that seam that we created on the 2 joined pieces. We want to make sure it's as closely matching as possible, because we're then going to flip it to the other side and press. But first, we're going to go ahead and add our 3/8 seam along this piece as well. In my personal opinion, this is where the shoe pattern starts to get more complicated, because we have a lot of layering and a lot of individual pieces that are being joined. And of course, you don't want to have to unstitch a sewed line and redo it. So as you can see here, we've got it stitched, and we're just going to turn that lining piece towards the top part of our toe shoe. And as you can see, it encloses that hem that we just made with the 3 pieces being joined. And now we're just maneuvering it, making sure it's as flat as possible, and ironing to lay everything flat. And if you guys can see the vision here, trust the process, we have the top part of the shoe completely finished. Of course, we are going to add a top stitch about 1/4 of an inch from the seam that we just created, just to give it a little visual interest and make sure that it stays flat. But we're done. And now we can move forward with each of the other top portions of our shoes. This is kind of exciting once you get to this part, because it all starts to look like an actual shoe. The next step in this process, since we will be joining 2 curved hems, is to add a gathering stitch along the toe portions of our shoes. Gathering stitch is just a really widely placed straight line stitch that we'll be able to pull the end threads to kind of bunch and gather the toe part so that it'll better fit the rounded edge of the soles. So here I'm just adding our gathering stitches to the toe portions of our shoes. And adjusting them so that they curve correctly and properly to fit the shoe. This is the issue with that disappearing ink again. If you wait too long, the ink will disappear off of what you drew it on. So here I'm just remarking those side marks, because that's where those side seams of the top portion of our shoe need to be aligned. And so taking the exterior of the piece and our foam that I cut to go in the shoe, we're then gonna align right sides together, again meaning the portions that are gonna be seen. So the exterior top part of the shoe will be aligned to the exterior bottom part of the shoe. And here I'm just pinching and tucking, pinning everything in place so that it can be evenly spaced once I go to take it to the sewing machine. And then of course, once that's all together, we will do our 3/8 stitch to stitch everything down in place. Here is another view of me working on the faux leather pair, doing the exact same thing again. We're pinning the right side of the top portion against the right side of the bottom portion, which would be the faux leather against the suede bottom. You can kind of get a better view of the dome kind of shape that you get at the toe because of the gathering and aligning with the round edge, which will give you more space for your toes as well. And then we're just gonna add in that 3/8 stitch, stitching the uppers to the bottoms, making sure we don't catch any of the extra fabric, because again, we don't wanna have to unstitch any seams in this project. Although I'm not gonna lie, I did have to unstitch a seam, but only one. While we are doing our 3/8 stitch, we do want it to be a basting stitch. So again, as wide a stitch as possible. My sewing machine, the default is 2.5, and for basting stitches, I set it to 5, because those basting stitches, if you do have to undo something, it's gonna be a lot easier to unpick those and readjust as needed versus unpicking the normal 2.5 or smaller stitch. And once we have that 3/8 stitch done, we can then turn the shoe right side out and make sure that everything looks correctly, everything aligns properly, and also test the fit as well. As we can see, everything looks pretty good. That heel looks a little wonky, which is actually the part that I ended up unpicking and re-sewing. But then I tested it on my foot to make sure it fits well. And then we turn it back inside out to do our final stitch or any adjustments that need to be made. And then of course, once we have our uppers and bottoms joined, we're then gonna take the lining piece of the sole and place it over the top of our upper shoe. So as you can see, I'm showing you here everything clipped together. We have the foam on one side, which is the bottom sole essentially. And then we're going to place the lining sole on top of our uppers for the shoe. And we're gonna place it with the right side facing in. And then taking that to the sewing machine, we're going to, using a normal stitch, we're going to sew that 3/8 seam all the way around. And as you sew around, you do wanna remember that you need to leave about 1.5 to a 2-inch gap in the stitch so that we can turn the shoe inside out. And once we get to that edge that we're gonna leave open, we're gonna make sure to back stitch to make sure the seams don't come unraveled. And then because at this point I fully committed to not having to restitch this if it was wrong, I went ahead and trimmed the edges as well to have a shorter or a smaller seam allowance inside of the shoe. And then the slightly tedious part, in my opinion, using that 2-inch hole, we need to now pull the shoe as delicately as possible to not pop any stitches inside out. And even though it seems really easy here on camera, it was actually kind of frustrating. And of course, shape the toe, shape the heel once you're done, and then turn it again, right sides out, and you have a shoe. Voila. Of course, that 2-inch that you left open on the inside, you're gonna have to go through and hand stitch that in place. It doesn't have to be a pretty hand stitch since it is inside the shoe. And then of course, we repeat that with all of our other shoes. Now for the more experimental part of this project. All of the shoes have been fully constructed and we're now just going to add our rubber soles onto the burgundy and white pair. Initially, I chose some shoe glue just because that's what I had and it worked well to repair shoes that I've had in the past. But I don't know if this shoe glue was old or maybe partially dried out, but it was really chunky and it just was not spreading well at all. So I ended up calling it quits on that and grabbing this contact cement that I keep for making planner covers. And I ended up using that instead. And so again, just applying a very even, solid layer, not too thick, not too thin, which is vague, but if you know, you know. And I used my foam brush here to spread it out. And then of course, we're gonna do an equally thick and thin layer on the sole of the shoe itself. And once we have our glue applied, we're then gonna put the shoe on top and press really well. I ended up actually putting my foot in the shoe and pressing with all my body weight to try to get it to, stick a lot better. And then of course, we're gonna do the other shoe as well. And while it's not on camera, I actually have a large book press that I use for bookbinding. And once everything was glued here, I went ahead and put it into the press on the tightest setting so that it would have that pressure as it dried as well. And then we're on to the final day of this project, which is gonna be finishing off the soles of these shoes. Grabbing the most heavy-duty pair of scissors that I have, I went ahead and trimmed as close to the seam as possible on the rubber soles. So kind of following the stitch pattern from where we joined the uppers to the bottoms of the shoe, I had a goal that the rubber sole would align perfectly with that seam, making up the bottom of the shoe. So just working my way around. I will say this rubber is a lot harder to cut than I initially thought. While these scissors did the job, it did a very jagged job. So I would have liked to have maybe cut it with a knife maybe, but I was not that confident in my knife cutting skills that I would not cut the fabric of the shoe itself. And so as a final step, just to make sure it's sealed all the way to the edge with no glue seepage, I went ahead and went along the edge with some more contact cement and these craft clips that I keep to add pressure and help that glue dry along the edge as well. I have a scrap piece of plastic there that I just used to clean up any seepage so that you don't have like visible glue seepage or visible glue on the bottom of the shoe. I'm sure we've all ordered shoes off of like Amazon or a really cheap store in town where they're so cheaply made that they don't care and they have all that glue visible on the bottom of the shoe where they put the sole. But I really didn't want that to happen with these shoes, so I took the time. And with that, I'm gonna finish up everything else off camera, let this dry, and we'll be ready for the big reveal.
Hello there, and welcome to the exciting world of kids. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, everyone, and that brings us to the end of this project. I'm really happy to have finished this project, one, because it was kind of trying and difficult at times, but two, because it allowed me to do the project over again, but do things the correct way. As we can see from the older pair of house shoes that I made the first time, I cut a lot of corners. I didn't add any kind of stabilization to the shoe, which is why it's real floppy. And then I didn't even do the sew and fold method, which you guys saw me do with these, where I had to pull it through. I just sewed it together because I was just being lazy. And so with these 3 pair, I actually followed the steps as expected. And honestly, they came out great. If I had to pick a favorite so far, it would be, surprise, surprise, the burgundy and white leaf pattern with the rubber outsole onto them. These were honestly the one I was most nervous about. Since I had never applied a sole, I didn't know how it would work. And guaranteed, I haven't, run 1,000 miles or walked to the store in these or anything crazy. I've just worn them around the house, and honestly, they're very stable. They're very sturdy, and I'm really excited to wear these. They're super comfortable too. Adding in that foam for the bottom, which I did not do for the original shoes, it really adds an extra level of comfort when walking in these. The only issue with this pair is that the gold embroidery, which I did very lazily on the sewing machine. I don't embroider as a hobby, so I'm not that skilled in it. So I just added some gold lines of thread with my sewing machine, but it honestly could have done without because it's so subtle. You can barely tell that it's there. And then also with all the shoes, sewing the foam bottom insole into the bottom of the shoe, it kind of added extra bulk to the seams along the edges of all the shoes, which is kind of an issue, especially in the white faux leather pair. One confession, I tried to make the white faux leather the first go round when I made my original house shoes, but this leather, it just does not play well. It wrinkles really easily, and it's really thin. I mean, I did get it from Dollar Tree, and I wanted to try it out on something, and the first pair of shoes ended up being a disaster, so I scrapped those. And then even with these, the leather is really loose. So I could have done the ankle elastic a lot tighter so it fits better, but also it still ended up bulging oddly at the toe as I was sewing it. So these I'm not as happy about as the other 2 pair, but I will still wear these. And then moving on to the 3rd pair, the house shoes. They came out phenomenal. I really love this color. I love this fabric. Obviously, we got new kind kind of grippy fabric for the bottom, which I'll be able to wear around the house. And then with these, because there's no hard bottom or anything, the seams from the foam at the bottom are a lot less noticeable for me. You know, house shoes, I just throw them on, walk around the house, do what I have to do, and I hardly notice. If I could make this project again, I think I would stick with canvas fabrics over faux leathers or other fabrics. Maybe if I had a higher quality faux leather or even an actual leather, I would like these more. But you can't go wrong with canvas. And of course I did do the firm fusible for the top part, which is why it has such stability. It kind of just stands there instead of flopping around. But I think if I would make another pair, and I probably will, I'd probably stick to canvas fabrics just because they work really well with this project. And also in terms of long-term use, it's gonna be great for washability. Like these canvas pair, it's contact cement that I use to cement this, so I'm pretty confident in it. So for the canvas pair, I'd probably be very comfortable throwing these in the wash. I washed my old pair of house shoes maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, and they were totally fine. Maybe with the burgundy pair, I would let them air dry just to help that glue stay longer in the hopes of not weakening the glue basically. But the faux leather ones, I would not wash these at all. I actually had a hard time pressing the seams while making these because I learned very quickly, because I burned a hole through it, that this faux leather cannot stand any heat at all. Luckily, the hole, I believe, is hidden in a seam. It's not like super obvious, so you're not gonna notice it, which is fine. Because like I said, I still plan on wearing these, at least until I make a white canvas pair to go with these two. So with that, I thank you all for sticking with me for another project this week. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next week for our other projects.